Welcome back, everyone. I am Dr. Elizabeth from Psychology for Geeks, and today I have another horror panel for you guys with a bunch of new faces today, and Hope. and yeah, I needed like an emotional support person to help me get through this panel and sort of understand because last panel everybody was very excited about everything and I had no idea what anybody was talking about. And I have a sneaky suspicion that's going to be the same, but that is okay. I am here to learn. And yeah, so we are going to do sort of like a brief sort of like introduction here for our panelists. And then we're just going to start right in with how did you get involved in the horror scene? Or when did that start for you? All right, Hope, you're my emotional support person. You want to go first?
Sure. I am Hope from Mind Brain Movies podcast. I work with Liz on many factors with the nonprofit as well as podcasting. And I got into horror when I was just a wee baby. Like, my grandmother was a Halloween fanatic, and so that was what I grew up with.
Wait, like the movie or like the holiday?
The holiday.
Oh, okay.
And then from there, my love of horror grew, and I just loved spooky stuff, always have. And even kind of went in with my work in and of itself. I used to be a crime scene cleaner. So not only that, but I love all things horror. Like I said, it's not only my personal but professional life. So um yeah, it's just all encompassing and I love it. It's great. It's underrated and I love it.
So what I'm gonna do, I think it might be a little bit different and in everyone's sort of like view of who's here
You
today.
point them out.
Yeah, so I'm gonna do that so we can just go in a row. Um oh no, you said it earlier and I totally forgot how to say your name. Um it's is it
Is
Easin?
it
Easin.
Easin? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So how did I get into horror?
Yeah, who are you and how did you get in horror? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I'm Easin. I'm the spooky therapist. A therapist. I work with people who have religious trauma, and complex family trauma, and I practice in Pennsylvania. But then I also post memes, which can be enjoyed by people anywhere. And then I'm also a singer and a songwriter in a band. And so it's funny to say, like, how did I get into horror? I actually had like serious imposter syndrome when Liz reached out to me about being on this podcast. And I think I emailed her back. I was like, I don't know if I really count as like a horror fan. I like spooky stuff, but I have a really low tolerance for watching gore. And Liz was like really sweet about it and was like, no, like it does sound like you're into it. And I'm like talking to I ran it past my husband too. I was like, I don't know if I can like call myself a true horror fan. And he's like, you are though. Like you read horror books and you'll listen to podcasts. You're just not great with the visuals. And I do like some horror movies. So anyway, I guess if I leave out my imposter syndrome, I feel like I've been into horror since I was very young. Like those were the kind of books that I gravitated to in the library. But I have my own lived experience with religious trauma, so I couldn't sort of be like openly into it until my 20s. And then living in Phoenixville, PA, where I'm located, it's a big horror town because the Blob movie was filmed here, and we have a like big horror festivals every year, and there's a horror night at the theater every month. So I've been able to like slowly get more into it. And so I would say by now I would say I am definitely more of a comedy drama person. But yeah, I guess that's the story of how I got into horror, and I feel like I'm still on my journey of getting more into it.
Wait. Before we move on to Lisa, I have a question though, because I have a feeling that your idea of spooky might not be my idea of spooky. So like, what do you mean when you say spooky?
Yeah, so I don't know what your idea of spooky is either. For me, it's like all of the Halloween, goth, alternative stuff. I'm very into ghosts and paranormal. My kind of like found family mom is a ghost hunter. Um, so so that area I'm into. Um, yeah, I just love all things Halloween, and I had like a Halloween
Look at
themed
her
wedding.
background. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I had a Halloween themed wedding, and we take like trips to paranormal or like alternative destinations. Yeah, I
That
don't know how to sum it up.
no, yeah, because I'm like, so for me, one of the scariest aspects, I guess, would of like scary movies is ghosts, because what are you supposed to do if a ghost is hunting you? Like a serial killer, like fight back, run away, come please, ask someone for help. But if it's a ghost, like what do you? Nothing. Like you're done. Like you'll be hunted for the rest of your life. Like like there's nothing you can do to sort of like evade it. So even then, that's still kind of like, yeah, that's really that's really horror for me.
Well, I was laughing because I'm like reaching over here and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gone. But I was like, what do you do when a ghost is after you? I just call my like found mom and I'm like, can you come like cleanse my house? She
Break the
comes
sage
over and
out.
puts crystals. Yeah, we don't use like sage because I know of like the shortages and stuff. But she actually just has you talk to the ghost and nicely ask it to leave. Which was a lot less complicated than I thought ghost hunting would be. But she came over with her like light up thingy. I forget what it's called. I'm blanking on the name, but like the lights,
The
like
EMF reader?
yes, EMF. And then she would like say which ones are something to be worried about or not. And she was like, just be assertive. It was like, this is kind of like therapy. She was like, just assertively ask it to leave. I was like, so we're setting boundaries with the ghosts?
The ghost is like, this is my space. Please don't invade it.
You could do what they did in Savannah and just build curved walls so that when the ghost comes in, they just leave because there's no corner to get stuck in.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Savannah has so much history and like the ghosts and everything. Oh, I love it. If none of you have been to Savannah, I highly recommend it. I love it.
I will add that to the list.
Okay, Lisa, you want to go next?
Yeah, my name is Lisa, and I have a private practice called Pop Culture Counseling. I'm located in Utah. I mostly see teens and young adults, but I do have some adult lessons, is what we have decided to call them at my practice. So those are people over 30 who are adult lessons. I got into horror when I was very young. Chucky came out when I was 5, and I have not had a doll since. Because my dad let me watch Chucky when I was 5.
Oh gosh.
Also,
wait, how did you like overcome that? Because I was a lot older, and I'm still like, nah.
Oh no, even in high school, walking into like Hot Topic where they have the Chucky dolls,
Yeah.
I would stop dead, turn around, back away from it without looking at it, and then go down the other aisle. Like, could not. Also, my dad would run his fingers across my door when I was like 7 and tell me Freddie was coming to get me. So probably like 5 years ago, Robert Englund was actually at Salt Lake's Fan X, so that's our version of Comic-Con. I told him that story. He said most of his fan base now is adult women whose brothers and fathers tortured them as children. So I'm also very into ghost hunting. I can tell you the equipment names. I have to sleep with sound, and currently for about a year now, we've been watching Ghost Hunters on Freevee because it's a 24-hour loop. And so it's all like 12, 13, 14 seasons of Ghost Hunters just on a loop. And so that's
Nice.
That's what we watch.
Felicia?
Hello, everyone. First, Easin, that wallpaper is insane. I want it all throughout my house. But hello, everyone. I'm Felicia, and I am the second half of Two Chicks in a Horror Flick, and we have a horror movie review podcast. I said review correctly. Okay. Tawny, you'll hear from her in a minute. And yeah, we've been doing it for 4 years, and we get together and review horror movies and freaking love it and love the community. It's been the best ever. As far as when I got introduced to horror, same as Lisa, when I was very little, my parents My parents were young, 20 and 21, and they loved to scare me. Or if they were watching horror movies, I was sitting right there in the room. So I remember old movies, Magic, Night of the Living Dead, Alice, Sweet Alice. I remember these so vividly in my mind as just being terrified. Like the dummy in Magic, I remember laying in my bed and hearing it downstairs going, "Let me out!" And then my dad would hide under my bed so that when I got into bed, he'd grab my ankle, just like all kinds of stuff. But I grew up loving horror as a teenager. Really, was a hard time for me. And I just found solace and escape in my Stephen King books, binge Stephen King, love Stephen King, and love horror stories in general. And now that I'm a mom of 3, all my girls, my little one wants to be a horror movie filmmaker, is what she says. And my older ones are just getting into horror, and they're 21 and 19, and they're just trying to like watch some horror. I think all of their first experience with horror, and some people might not say it's horror, but is Jurassic Park. So that was kind of their first experience watching that when they were toddlers. But here's the thing, they wanted to and they loved it, and it didn't scare them, so they really like it. And yeah, that's it about me.
Yeah, don't a lot of them watch the movies with you when you record? So
Yeah, they so not the little one, the little one's 10 now, but yes, the older ones would watch it with me, so I wasn't watching it alone. And my oldest, my 21-year-old, is terrified, just absolutely terrified of everything. My middle one, she's hard to please. She usually falls asleep. My little one, she's really just seen Jurassic Park. She's seen all the A Quiet Place series. She's seen some of the Chuckies. Nothing scared her. She was really into it, except the most recent A Quiet Place. We went to the movie theater as a family, and we were super stoked because the whole family was going to see a horror movie together. This was epic. I think because it was in the theater and the intensity of it and just how that magnifies the intensity of the jump scares, she left. She was real quiet. And I think she's trying to be tough in front of her sisters. And so later when we got home, I took her aside and I said, "Why don't you sleep with me tonight? Because I'm kind of scared." And we built like a fort on my bed.
oh,
And then once we were in bed, I was like, "Hey, it's okay to be scared. Tell me." And she admitted, she was like, "Yeah, that was a little bit too much." And I go, "I'm sorry that I had," and she's like, no, I'm really happy I got to go and watch it. And I go, "Okay, well, at least now we know your limit. Now we know kind of what we need to avoid for now." And yeah.
bringing
so I'm
it in the
guessing
family.
No, I'm guessing you didn't continue the tradition of like scaring your daughters and they're like,
No, because I hate being scared. Well, obviously I like being scared, but in a safe way. And I think that's what movies are. It's experiencing fear in a safe way. I hate haunted houses. I hate going into haunted houses and there's actual people there in my space trying to scare me. And I hate it when my kids scare me, when they jump out at me. Oh my God, I hate it. So I don't do that to them because I don't want to, get the retaliation.
all right. And we have the second part of Two Chicks and a Horror Flick now.
Tawny.
Yeah, I can go next. So I'm Tawny, the other half of Two Chicks and a Horror Flick, obviously. And like Felicia said, we just review movies. We also get into a little bit of trivia and just talk about wherever that movie kind of takes us. For me, I first got into horror when I was a child too, and like so many of us, it was definitely, I was exposed to it because my family liked it. So my dad has always liked horror or horror adjacent things, and so did a lot of his siblings, so a lot of my aunts and uncles. And I also watched Child's Play, I'm pretty sure, when I was like 5. And I got it. This is what I have up on my wall here. You can see this VHS tape. That's actually a bootleg version of Child's Play 1 through 4, like 4 Chucky movies. I don't know how it all fit on one VHS. I don't know. We're not going to talk about it. But my uncle somehow, for some reason, let me watch that. And I don't remember it really scaring me, but I was like I was really intrigued by it. And so Chucky has always stuck with me. He's my favorite of all the, classic slashers. And but yeah, even as a kid, I enjoyed that. I was really drawn to it, and I always have been sort of drawn to the scary version of things. I used to check out the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books in elementary school over and over again, and so those were
Yep.
terrifying to look at. And you can kind of even see on my wall, I have some sort of art inspired by that look and feel, just very haunting. And I also liked more of the horror video game area. So for video games as well, just anything kind of in that darker realm. And my family also is very much into true crime. So I watched and consumed a lot of true crime content as a kid, which I think contributed to anxiety that I have also always had. So that's interesting. I'm sure we'll get into that later. It's a little hand in hand action, probably the love of horror and anxiety about the world. And then I just was going to add, Easin, to your point, you talk about imposter syndrome. I definitely felt that coming on today too, because you all are professionals, and Felicia and I love horror movies, but as far as the mental health side of things, I mean, we're interested in mental health, and we talk about it often for ourselves. But I'm so excited to hear and learn from you guys on that side of things, because I'm like, well, we just watch movies, so I don't know.
Well, that was sort of like the whole idea. I wanted to have sort of like a mix of people, because for the first few panels that I did, it was all mental health professionals. And then afterwards, I was like, yeah, we're just repeating the same thing over and over. Like, yeah, we agree. Yes, we agree. We agree with each other. And I'm like, well, let's have like different perspectives, like different people like that still sort of like love the same fandom, but they have like a slightly different experience on it. So I hope we can share a lot of our own sort of like knowledge here today. Adam, you want to go next?
Sure. So my name's Adam. I am a licensed mental health counselor in Orlando, Florida. And I'm also a media psychologist, but I don't like the word psychologist because I know that can get complicated with state licensing boards. So I call myself a storyologist.
Oh, I like that.
And my love for horror started like everyone else's when I was little. I had a fascination with Thriller, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Like if it came on MTV, I could be outside and I would run in and just watch the television. And then my mom showed me Halloween, I think around 11. I was little, and then I fell in love with Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's still to this day my favorite. Wes Craven is probably my favorite director. But I always got a kick out of the fact that my mom would always ask me like, why do you like this stuff? And I'm like, like it's your fault. Like so yeah, horror's always I wanted to be a horror director, and then I ended up not. I pursued film for a while, and then I moved into mental health counseling. And Felicia, you made me think about with Quiet Place. Something I love about this series is when you were in the theater, it almost felt like people were afraid to eat their popcorn, because if you made noise in the theater, it was like the things were going to come out and attack you. And there was like a psychology to that I was like, oh, that's really interesting. But
That is very cool. You're absolutely right.
I'm over here like, were your childhoods okay? Like, were you just... I was terrified because I just remember like I had my mom is the youngest sort of like of a bunch of siblings. So my siblings and I are the youngest in her family. So I had a lot of like cousins that would tell me about like the scary hand, because I grew up in Mexico up until I was 9, and so there's a lot of sort of like stories, and I love hearing the stories, but then I can't sleep at night because I'm so scared. I'm like, what if something does touch my foot? And then like my cousins would like sometimes, like I think one of them slept over and did that. I think my mom did it to them, and I was like, that's great. Payback for all the times they scared me about like the man that was going to appear like if I like cross the alley. And to this day, like even if I go to Mexico, like it looks like the town looks completely different than when I was a kid, but I'm still really afraid of crossing this one street because it used to be sort of like this really dark alley when I was a kid, and it was a very small town in Mexico, so it's like no paved roads or anything like that. And yeah, I'm still scared. I don't look to the sides. I just kind of like cross the street because I'm afraid I might see something. And I think it's partially it came. There's a lot of stories that get passed down, a lot of sort of like beliefs in the Mexican culture about like ghosts and
I was
paranormal things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very curious because in Mexican culture, the Dia de los Muertos, and like how that's celebration of the dead. So like you would think it would have a positive outlook on it.
Right. But the thing is that it depends. I didn't even know because I think the first time that I watched a movie that featured that, I think it was like the Book of the Dead. And I was like, that's so fake. Like nobody does that. Because in my town and like the area that I lived in, we don't really celebrate that. It was more of a like a religious thing. So like you go to mass. That's what you
Right.
do. But you don't have that type of celebration. But they're like in other states in Mexico, they do have those type of celebrations. And I wasn't even aware because we didn't do anything like that. And I think now it has become more of a thing where it has reached like my little town. And a few years ago, a couple of my cousins, they sent pictures or posted pictures on social media about like the little things that they made for that. But yeah, not me.
Lisa?
Listen, you can just talk.
Okay, I was
You can just interrupt
You're
me.
too polite, Lisa. You're
I
way
was-
too polite.
sorry, I worked for corporate America. Sorry.
Yeah,
These
she's
are
talk.
not corporate, lady.
So I spent some time in New Mexico, and we celebrated Dia de la Muerta. And it was very much all of the sugar skulls, all of the bags, the luminaria. So we had a lot of those around the plaza in my town because I lived in a tourist town. So yeah, we all celebrated that. When I worked in a residential facility, I would show Coco on Dia de la Muerta and teach them about the Day of the Dead celebration
But
by
that's like,
having a frienda. But there's that, but then there's the other side because then you have La Llorona
oh
in
yeah, okay.
Mexican culture. So you have, if you die well and everyone remembers you, happy celebration. If you drown your children, you get to turn into a ghost.
I think like to this day, like I have, because I'm kind of like curious, right, about like scary movies, and I'm like, I kind of want to watch, but I won't be scared. And then so I'll go to my siblings and I'm like, hey, because I heard that they had, I think there were like 2 movies that I am aware of that they made on La Llorona. And then I was like, oh, you know what? Yeah, maybe I'll watch it, like just to see, because I'm like, I'm an adult now. I think it'll be okay. Like I don't, it's not real. I know that. And I went to my siblings and I was like, hey, would you watch this with me? And it was an automatic no. Like, why would you even ask that? And I was like, but it's not going to be scary. It's like animated or whatever. And they're like, no, I'm not watching that. And like to this day, that's still like a really scary thing. Of seeing someone like in a wedding dress. In my town, it was she was wearing a wedding dress, and there was a lot, because it's a very small rural town. There's a lot of sort of like creeks and alleys and stuff that were near my home, and we used to live with the house still there, right next to this like sports, like soccer field that at night was like really dark because it was empty. So that was really creepy. And then so I don't go outside at night, you guys, because that's
Yeah.
scary.
The Conjuring
You know, Lisa-
version, the Conjuring version of La Llorona is the least scary of the Conjuring movies, in my opinion. So yes,
Up to
Adam.
me.
Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, you bring up an interesting point about how when you die, I almost said die well. I don't know if that's what I mean, but when you die, people remember you favorably, or you die traumatically. Kind of, if we think about all the horror films, everything kind of, all those characters, whether it's Freddy, Jason, maybe Chucky,
Yeah.
they all had like traumatic childhood, right? Like they died in traumatic ways, and so then that's where their story begins. And that's something, as a mental health counselor, what I love is the that connection to like generational trauma and childhood trauma, and being able to help clients relate what they're experiencing to maybe they have a film that they enjoy or a story, and then we can use that as a metaphor.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you think about The Shining, all the people who died in the Overlook in a very bad way, both in the book and in the movie, stay there on that ground, and you can't get away from them. So,
Well, and their weapons and, for lack of a better word, uniforms, are an
Yeah.
extension of those. They become symbols of their trauma or coping, maybe, to a certain
Yeah.
extent.
So I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question actually for Easin. One of my favorite genre of horror movie is folk horror, horror that has this element of like religion gone wrong. That's something I just absolutely love. And I was wondering your take on that, since religious trauma in the real world is something that you work with, and if you've seen those kind of movies, and just would really curious about what you feel about them, or anything that you want to share.
Do you have any examples of what movies you feel fall into that category?
Like Wicker
Oof.
Man.
Oh,
The Witch?
yeah. So you have like, The Witch, Wicker
I actually do
Man,
really like The Witch. That's one I can handle.
Ritual. Okay. Rituals one. Oh gosh, now there seems like a lot of, what were we watching, Tawny, where I can picture it in
Lamb.
my, Lamb.
Village. The Village.
Yeah,
count?
The Village. Even Silent Hill has that element of this cult.
Yeah.
Midsummer.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, and how about
Midsommar.
Midnight Mass?
Oh yeah.
I know
Yes.
it was a series, but I'm thinking of Midnight Mass.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
good though.
Yes.
So good.
Yes. Okay, so all of these examples. Yes.
Yeah, so I haven't actually given thought to that before. This is really interesting to think about. I guess what's coming to mind is just like we're less likely to notice that things are going wrong when it's someone who's already in a position of power and respect. I guess my mind is immediately going to Midnight Mass because that's the one that I probably have watched the most times. Yeah, I'm just thinking about how it can take longer to notice that things aren't quite right when there's already ritual involved.
Yeah.
I
I don't know.
I was just curious to pick up from there.
I don't know if this would count, but in the new Exorcist, I can't remember what it's called, but the two girls.
Oh yeah, the True Believer. Is that
Something,
the
Believers, or,
Yeah, Something Believer.
those films always bother me because there's always a moment where they go to the church, they go to the priest to ask for help, and then they have to get permission. And I know, and specifically in that film, the priest comes back and says they've denied the request. It's too dangerous. We have to think of the children. And but they recognize that there's also this demonic thing happening. So the two things that always come to mind is it always bothered me that in those instances the church says no. And also, like, how do you explain that at the end? Like, when the movie's over, how do people tell others about why this person's missing, or what the what they experience? Like, everyone just kind of goes back to their lives, but there's going to be questions in trauma, and people are going to, I'm sure, therapy.
No, it's
So
all
you hope
been
then, right?
black
You hope.
flash and done.
Yeah. I mean, the characters in the movie, like when something happens
Yeah.
to them and they yes, oh gosh, so many conversations Tawny and I have, and I'm also really, I consume way too much true crime. And so I will go, all right, now let's talk about how are they going to cover that up? Or how are they going to explain that?
Well, when it comes to trauma, a lot of people, especially if they're really young, they just sort of forget that they experienced that, and then sort of like move on, because that's sort of like the one way that they're able to survive
Just repression,
through it.
yeah.
So sort of just to forget about it. And I'm just thinking about a lot of the clients that I worked with when they experience. I work a lot with Hispanic population, and there is a huge trauma of them sort of like crossing over to the US and having to go through the river and having to go to the desert and all of these really horrible experiences, and then they're just kind of like, it's something that they had to do. It just kind of like happened. It was hard, but now moving on, we're focused on trying to keep a job and not getting sent back to Mexico or whatever country they came from. So it's sort of like they're still like on survival mode the whole time. So they're still like all that fear, it's like still with them. And it just doesn't really ever get processed most of the time.
As I said, I can attest to that. Being the former crime scene cleaner, a lot of the times people don't realize they focalize on the actual crime or what happened, but they never focalize on the people involved with it who are left behind. Like I don't know if you guys watched the Dahmer series on Netflix, but when they did those episodes focalizing on the people left in the apartments he lived in, I was like, yeah, that's true. No one ever checked in on them. They were all like had sleepovers in the same floor together because they were scared. A lot of the times when I would show up to a scene, when the police would be gone, the EMTs would be gone, everything is gone, they're just left there. They don't know what to do. And usually I was the first step in the healing process. I'd be like their first like therapist, and I would talk them through things and, say, this is what you need to do. This is what I can help you with. A lot of the times I would have to send my team in to clean it because I was outside, like having them cry on my shoulder because they don't know what's happening. All this just was thrown at them, and they don't know how to process it, and you have to walk them through those steps. And if someone doesn't have someone to help them, guide them, who knows what's going to happen. So it's one of those things where there's that trauma, but sometimes they don't know who to turn to. A lot, the one thing I'd always get when I would go to these crime scenes is, I didn't even know you guys were a job. I didn't even know you guys existed. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of glad you didn't know we were a thing. That means you didn't need us, thankfully, until now. But yeah, it's just the not knowing, or not knowing resources, or not being able to access those resources. And so a lot of times they would, if someone isn't there, they just have to repress it or move on. So it's like that trauma is always there, and it's really sad,
Well,
that makes me think about both your stories, but like whether it's somebody crossing over the border and then trying to live a better life, or people left in the aftermath of a crime, then the trauma continues because of politics and media and reporters asking questions. Oh, you were the neighbor. What do you know about this person? And then even years later, if you tell the story of like, oh, I lived in this apartment, oh, tell me about, what was it like? What did you? And so it's constantly coming back. And so our bodies have somebody joked about the neuralizer from Men in Black.
Oh yeah.
Our bodies have that kind of natural way of doing that, and to dissociate and sometimes completely block out the memory. And that's where we come in to try to help gently guide them back so that the memory of it's not as intense. I know that wasn't horror related, but that made me think of that.
And like even the people who live in the Amityville house had to change the windows, had to change the house's name, had to change the address. That way people would stop going, oh, you live in the Amityville house? What's happened? What have you seen? Nothing. It's a house. I live there. It's not haunted anymore. Like, so there's
the stairs from The Exorcist in DC. There's so many people who go to DC just for the stairs, Like,
so we get
the
to
Nightmare on Elm Street
notice.
house.
Yeah, we get to notice those things. And then if you're the person who lives there, so like I live in Utah, and the real up house is across the street from my house. I know the person who lives there. We have so much traffic for people who are coming to take pictures with that house. It's the same with horror movies, that people just connect with
Mhm.
these movies and, oh, let's buy a My Buddy doll and I'll have my own Chucky. Like, let's buy the Freddy Krueger hands that me and Adam have because they tortured us as a kid, and this is us showing power over
Mhm.
our trauma. Like, no, I can embrace this movie. I can embrace this fear that had me in a hold for so many years.
As a therapist, I like tangible. I do a lot of like role playing games. I'll run like horror themed therapeutic role playing games, but so theater of the mind is a big part of my practice. But I also like tangible items, and so I have a lot of stuff in my office that people can hold. Like I've got the gloves, I've got nunchucks from Alice from Nightmare 4 that she signed, and then we'll use like the quotes from the movies to try to relate it to anxiety. Over here I've got the Necronomicon from Evil Dead, and I had the designer put in mental health like issues in there, so one I could write it off into the clients can look at it, and I'm trying to figure out a way that they can put their own stuff into it if they want, just as a metaphor to move on from the trauma, like you were saying, Lisa.
Yeah.
So I think tangible items are a great way to.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, even Tawny, she had her Chucky VHS in the background
Yeah.
to get over
It makes me wonder though, because so before Hot Topic sort of like split off into Buck's Lunch, and they had all the cool things I like, and now I go to both of them. I was sort of afraid of going into Hot Topic because it was all of the things I was afraid of. So
the
like
old school Hot Topic.
Yeah.
yeah, I was just afraid, you guys. I'm just a scaredy cat. But so what are some like the stereotypes that you had either heard clients or like, if you go to any of these like fandom events, like what are some of the stereotypes that people have of like horror fans in general?
If you can
Oh.
sleep to a horror movie, you're a psychopath.
So
I hear that from my clients all the time.
the big thing I will say is, a lot of the times when people think you love horror or you love all this, they're like, oh, you must be big and scary and you have issues, or you're mean or whatever. Honestly, me personally, I used to go to Comic-Cons all the time. I have now actually diverted from Comic-Cons because they're so toxic, and I only do horror conventions because they're the most positive, welcome, warming people on the planet. Like, anytime I go to a horror con, I'm like, I meet family there, I meet friends there, and it's because everyone's just so nice. I like there was one time I went there and I like had a migraine. I was like, oh, I have a headache. And I said that to my friend. And then like 5 vendors and 3 people were like, oh, I have Advil, I have a cold compress, I have this. I was like, thank you. Like, I've never been treated so well. So like, that's the big stereotype, like that they're mean and scary. And it's like, no, they're the sweetest people on the planet.
Wes Craven
I
was one of
totally
the sweetest guys. You never hear a bad story about him.
Yeah. Robert Englund said the first time he walked on set, because I've watched Adam, I don't know if you've watched the 4-hour-long Freddy Krueger documentary.
Have
Yeah.
I watched it? Yes, I
Checking. But Robert Englund said the first time he went on set, he thought he was going to come into this big, mean, buff guy, and there's preppy, Wes Craven in his Ralph Lauren shirt.
Yeah.
Just the nicest guy ever.
at the last Spooky Empire, I was in line waiting to meet Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street. And so right as I get up there, Tuesday night, who's in Nightmare 4, runs over to talk to her. And then Kane Hodder, who played Jason, comes over and hugs the both of them from behind, and just verbal. I didn't even realize I said it. I just went, it's the first time that man's ever snuck up on somebody and they survived. And he just burst out laughing, and we just had a big laugh and stood around and talked for it. Was like I kind of forgot we were like, oh right, I'm paying you for an autograph. Like it was
Oh yeah,
was
every
just really nice.
time. Every time.
Yeah, I totally agree. The horror community is so kind and welcoming. And I think that's been part of what has like motivated me to kind of like push my comfort zone of what I'm comfortable watching. Because the people I meet, especially like in my town, and there's also a drive-in movie theater that shows mostly horror movies, not too far, like about an hour. And the people are just so nice that it makes me want to watch more horror movies because I'm like, well, I want to hang out with you guys and like maybe I can maybe I can like gradually stretch what I can tolerate, because it's very motivating. And something else really interesting, that I've noticed is that there's a huge overlap between the vegans and the horror fans, at least where I live, and I'm vegan. And I'm like, that's so funny. We're like to watch like a slasher film and be eating like your vegan hot dog. I don't know. I just really like the juxtaposition is really funny for me.
I will say I can watch like a horror movie where someone's being brutally massacred and tortured, and I'm like, oh, whatever. The minute like a cat or a dog shows up, I'm like, I have to turn this off. I can't handle this. Like whenever there's an animal involved, I'm like, that's when I freak out. Like humans, whatever, don't care. They die, cool. But when it comes to the animals, I'm like, I'm jumping through the TV trying to like stop it from happening. So I could see that because the horror fans are so kind and nice. And another thing too, every time I go to a horror convention, there's always at least one booth for like the Humane Society, the ASPCA, a local shelter. So like they're always hand in hand with like helping animals too, which I love. So I could totally see that. It's I never thought about it, but I could see it.
Yeah,
It's so the opposite of the stereotype of like, oh, like if you like horror, you must be violent, or like that's gonna make you into a violent person.
No, we love puppies. We just want puppies.
I hate when horror movie families have a dog. Like, oh look, here comes our dog to the new house, and I'm like, the dog's not gonna make it.
You know, whenever our dogs, we have 3 dogs, and whenever they start barking, we're like, you do realize that when the zombie apocalypse happens, like, I don't know what we're gonna do because like, they are way too loud. I had to look up in Quiet Place day 1. I looked up. Usually I don't do this, but I was like, does the cat survive? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to worry about it the entire movie, so I had to look up and told my friend who went with me, "Don't worry, the cat survives." Like you're.
That
I
was
assume
actually
we're
the
all
most
aware.
searched question for day 1 was,
Yeah.
does the cat survive?
Yeah, I was like, I assume we're all aware of the website. Does the dog die?
Yeah.
That
Yes.
one's helpful, especially for Liz. If you're scared of a lot of things, I like that website because you can get a little heads up.
Okay.
Liz
So
is petrified right now.
No. Because okay, so I love that you brought up the fact of like stepping out of your comfort zone because same thing. Like I've been watching a lot of streamers and VTubers, and a lot of them are like, yeah, I love like horror movies, and then they talk a little bit about sort of like the stories of it, and I'm like, hey, wait, that's a really good story. Like tell me more, and then they're like, oh, I don't want to spoil it. And I was like, I don't care. I want to know more of what's going on, but. They also talk about sort of like their own personal traumas and stuff, and that led me to be like, okay, is this something that people who experience like a lot of hardships sort of like are attracted to this fandom or type of storytelling, and now I'm like, I remember I growing up with Courage the Cowardly Dog and like Scooby-Doo, and I'm like, those are great, and I think that's why I love sort of like the stories, because at the end they were like not real, or like they were able to sort of like fix whatever weird
Usually
alien
it was just an
thing
old white
out.
man in a mask, so and they're always
That's the reality that we live in right now.
Yes.
And also,
It's the old white man that did it.
also different communities. Like growing up, growing up in the South, questioning my sexuality, part of the LGBTQ community, horror films. I didn't realize this till much later in life, but horror films were a
Queer-coded.
great. Wait, I'm sorry.
they're very queer coded.
Oh yeah, and great ways to relate. Right, there's a lot of themes within them, and even the final girl theme. There's always the final girl in horror films survives, and but that's even a lot of gay or LGBT people relate to that because of just the idea of subverting gender norms and catharsis and survival and so there's a lot of crossover and queer coding in that. In fact, I just
Yeah, Babadook.
Yeah,
but it's interesting that Babadook came out as such a like an queer icon.
I know.
I'm still baffled a little bit by that, but
I love it either
I'm here
way.
for it.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was reading a book called The Final Girls Support Group, and it's about all these final girls from the 80s horror, like
Yeah.
slasher films, and they survive, but then someone starts killing them off. And I'm like, was it the therapist? I wonder if it was the therapist. And I'm this main character is talking about all the stuff she was going. I was like, man, therapy is not working for you, hun. Like, we need to try something different. We need to do some different interventions because you're taking 3 hours to walk 2 blocks because you're taking cars and buses and going into a movie theater and doing all this stuff so no one follows you. And I'm like, somebody failed you.
To be fair, Sydney Prescott from Scream can't seem to leave her house without somebody in a ghost face mask trying to kill her. So
Yeah, that's true.
So I have a quick question. I know, Easin, you said you read a lot of horror books, and I also know Felicia and Tawny, they're big readers as well. They're I think you're even a part of like the horror book club thing, if I'm correct. Yeah. And
Yeah, a few of us horror podcasters put together a book club called Show Us Your Spines, where we read horror books together.
I love that.
yeah, so and I know a lot of people when they talk about horror, they talk about, the movies, the show, haunted houses, things like that, but no one really gravitates towards the books. And that's another thing too. Like Liz, you might not be a big movie person like for the visualization, but a lot of people seem to also overlook horror books. I know like I love or like horror manga, I love horror books, things like that. And honestly, some of them can be a bit scarier because you can let your imagination run wild because it's in book form. So like I want y'all ladies like Felicia and Tawny, like I want your opinion on horror
Well,
books.
also video games.
True.
I think Tawny mentioned video games earlier, and
did.
I have seen a little bit of other people play like those horror video games, and to me, like, because it's usually the beginning that I see, and it's like, ooh, what's happening? And it's a very sort of like detective story, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. I like those. I just don't ever get to finish because then I forget. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah. Talk about like what's the difference between like reading or like playing a game as opposed to like watching something.
I can say books and then let Tawny do the video games because I try to play horror video games and I'm so scared. I'm like so terrified I can't. I want to be able to though. But like this whole thing is Stephen King books, trying to get one of all of his books, but I have bookshelves everywhere with horror books. I would say prefer and I'm obsessed with horror books because of exactly what Hope was saying. I find it more scary because I can visualize, it's what I'm visualizing in my head. And then that's always going to be a manifestation of what terrifies me most. And then when we go to the movie, I'm just crossing my fingers that they hit the nail on the head. I've never encountered a movie that's better than the book, but I've encountered movies that have done a good job. And whenever there's anything where you don't see the monster or whatever the thing is going to be, and you're just waiting, you're just like, oh gosh, please let it be good, please, because it can ruin the whole thing. So I think it's scarier when I'm reading a book and what I'm imagining than what somebody puts in front of me. And that's why I admire good horror movies so much, because to really do a good horror movie, I just have so much respect when the director and the whole film crew and the actors pull that off and do an exceptional job. I just absolutely love that. But
wait,
yeah,
when you're reading, do you just like skip pages and then you're like,
no.
Why
That's
do
what
the
you don't
cheat
do that.
method like you, Liz?
You're gonna miss something. You're not no skipping pages.
No, I now, okay, so if I'm reading and this is really terrifying, I'm, I was thinking about this actually, Liz, because it seems you don't like feeling scared, maybe, because I do. So when I'm reading and it's really scary, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm just wrapped up in it. And if it's just really terrifying, maybe I'll take a moment and go, oh my God, what is happening? And then I'm right back into it like a page turner. So no, I do not skip, and I make sure I do not skip ahead. I do not read the end. I am in it. I'm in the journey that the book takes me, and I'm just hoping it takes me on a good journey.
Liz, can I ask you a question? Do you like roller coasters?
No.
Oh.
I hate roller coasters. I'm relating a lot to Liz through this. I'm like, I also hate roller
Everyone's like,
coasters.
yeah, that makes sense.
I think it was Hitchcock who equated kind of realizing that our response to horror suspense films is very similar to riding a roller coaster, where there's this moment of this thrill moment where you dip in the roller coaster and you scream, and then it's immediately followed by laughter because you're like, oh, I survived, I'm great. And so I was just curious if you like roller coasters, but then that makes sense. If
No, but
you
then
don't like that feeling.
now I'm curious because I'm like, I think it's anxiety, something that I've lived with all my life. So now I'm wondering if it part of what it was because I don't have that sense of control in roller coasters and like in movies. Like I don't I get very attached to the characters and the story. So I'm like, I really love fan fiction because then they just fix everything and then everybody gets to live and it's great. Because a lot of the times it's like,
I was gonna say, in October, Liz and I are doing a whole month of I'm breaking Liz, and I'm gonna do horror movies and everything with her. And I'm gonna hold her hand watching it. So like, we
starting
will
with
get her,
Scooby-Doo.
guys. We will get her.
Like,
If you want to finish it off, I've got a VR headset, and you could have her play Resident Evil.
No,
or Five Nights.
I think.
Adam, when you said that about the roller coaster thing, and then you have like this rush of, I don't know if it was happiness or joy or something, I was like, I don't get that. I don't experience that when I go on a roller coaster, and that's why I don't enjoy them. It's just all bad. And then I get off of it, and I'm like, now that I'm not on the roller coaster, I'm happy. I don't experience the joy of after the drop.
Yep.
So
yeah, I wonder if it's something that.
What is it?
Oh, sorry, Easin.
Oh no, you go ahead.
Finish
No,
what you
you
were
go.
saying.
It was it. I was just trailing off. You go.
Yeah, I wonder if it's something that you like. Are we hardwired to sort of seek that out? Some people are, and some people aren't, because, like Felicia said, like her and I are constantly, I feel like, on a quest to be scared. We want to watch movies that are going to scare us, and I think there's different levels of that experience, right? And so, like Felicia and I both, we cannot do haunted houses. That's like too real. It's too scary for us. But like you can kind of like walk it back, and tying in, like video games, I feel like are kind of the next maybe step down, because above watching a movie, now you're integrated into something, and a lot of times, the controller will vibrate or things will jump out at you, so you're a little bit more immersed in that. And I can do horror games, but not like a haunted house. And I feel like you also may be able to like work your way up, if that makes sense, because when I was a kid, one of the things that did scare me, and it's weird, I think back to being a child, and I wasn't scared a whole lot by movies or like ghosts or Chucky even, really. I was more scared by these stories I was hearing of true crime. I was more scared of somebody breaking into our house and murdering us, or, awful things like that, which is crazy to think about as a little kid. People are like, were you scared of this like movie things? I'm like, no. I was having recurring nightmares about people murdering us all in my house, but Chucky, no problem. But one thing that I did watch that scared me was the scene in Pee-wee's Big Adventure with Large Marge, if you guys remember this.
Yes.
And it's a very scary claymation moment. And that scare like I had like a physical scared reaction. And when I was a kid, I forced myself to watch it over and over again to like desensitize myself. I guess because I just didn't like that it scared me. And so I think there's obviously this level of control that you can sort of have over watching the movie. And I wonder if that's not kind of how you, maybe not even so consciously, but like work that muscle, because now it's like Felicia and I watch movies so much and not much scares us anymore. So then I think you kind of maybe go up to books, and then it's like, because books I think are also scarier.
Now, I'm so interested in, I don't know what is up with my brain, but I experience books the complete opposite. Maybe I'm just not that creative, but it is always way less scary to me to read a book. I'm like, I guess also maybe because I haven't watched as much, like the bank in my brain hasn't consumed that much.
Yeah, it's from
visual
opposite
content,
sides
so
of
it's
the
like hard for
spectrum.
me to
I think-
what my brain comes up with when I read a book is like very PG, I think. So
I
then
think
when
it
I'm gonna watch
also-
the movie, I'm always like, this is so much scarier than anything I could have possibly imagined.
I think it also has to do with how we visualize stuff, like when we close our eyes, because there's 3 different sets of people. I think I read there are people who can't picture anything. Then there are people who picture things in 3D or in like 2D. So if you think about an apple, it's just a flat apple. And then there are people who can picture things in 3D. So I can see the cup and I can picture what's in the cup and I can picture what's, and so you get those 3D people reading a horror book and they can see the background and see the bus and see the street and see the slasher and see the knife, and so maybe maybe that's helping.
Well, I
Also with-
wonder too if it's something to do with sort of like that experience, because too I would hear a lot of people, like when I was in high school, be like, I had a nightmare, somebody was trying to kill me, and like my nightmares are always like a spider that's jumping and chasing me. So that's very scary, you guys. But also like when it comes to like to haunted houses, I'm more kind of like, oh yeah, I'll go, like, because that's just like a person in like a thing,
Same
like,
here. I am more okay with haunted houses. That's
right,
so
right.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
because
this-
I'm like,
well,
because
Down to
that's just people,
primal.
and that's like a jump scare, and I'm like, I don't have to. I think because I go in thinking, oh, it's gonna be people scaring us, and that's like okay, it's just
So-
a bit of fun. Yeah.
That's what a movie
Easin
is,
and
though,
Elizabeth,
right?
it's like you guys' things are inverted. Because one set of you is totally fine with movies and the other set is like, nope.
I think with books and movies, one of the big things for me is in the book, a well-written book, it's perfect. And in a movie, the acting could be off, the whatever visual representation could be off. There's a lot of different things that could be off. Acting is the big piece for me. Like the acting is, I got to believe that they are scared and they are in it, and they are Lupita from A Quiet Place day one. Like they are really good. And so any of those little elements can throw me off. And in a book, that story is perfect in a well-written book. And so there was none of those pieces throwing me off. And so maybe that's why it's scarier to me. But I was curious, Liz, because you and Easin, actually, you're like, oh, I can do haunted houses. Like I right now thinking about haunted houses makes me feel sick to my stomach. I don't even have to go. No one's asking me to go to a haunted house, but I don't even want to think about it, because this is like, yes, they are people scaring you, but they're these people. Oh, you guys should watch Haunt. Okay. But there's these people that they're or not, they're real people, and they're in my space, and I don't know who they are, and they're unpredictable, and I know more than likely they're not going to kill me, but it's just like, even just their physical energy, like I will go through with my head buried in, well, I haven't gone for a long time, I was going to say my husband's, but like back in the day, my boyfriend's back like this, and I could just feel the person against me. But in a movie, it's so removed, it's so incredibly safe. I just have to turn it off. I'm not even in the same space as these people. So it just intrigued me. I'm not really trying to make a point.
But they're in my brain. But then they're in my brain.
Well, that's
I
why I think, Elizabeth, you need to start with the first Paranormal Activity as your first horror movie, because as the clock slows down, something's going to happen. And so then you can be like, nope, 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 nope. and then everything else is just home videos.
I think
until
Liz needs to
night.
start with
I was-
Beetlejuice.
I was gonna say, like,
I
No,
like
we're
was
starting
gonna
her with
say, maybe
Scooby-Doo.
Beetlejuice. I don't
We're
think I would
starting
start
her with
Paranormal
Scooby-Doo.
Activity.
I assume Beetlejuice was more along the comedy horror, and we weren't really like.
Paranormal Activities, actually, those are the types, like, it does take a lot for me to get scared watching a movie, but I have noticed the paranormal ones scare me more because I think they can't be explained away. And so, like, if I'm in my house at night and then I hear a noise, which is probably my cat knocking something over because that's what she does, I'm more likely to jump because I'm like, what was that? Whereas, like, a Freddy Krueger like character, I'm just not going to go to sleep. But the control thing that you guys are talking about, I think, is interesting because like with the book, you can close the book if you don't have a lot of experience watching certain things, or maybe you don't watch the news, so you're just not exposed to some imagery. Then when you're reading a book, your mind isn't gonna fill in that information with as much visual. Whereas in the film, we can, sometimes it can go over the top. I saw a film called Aqua Slash. If you guys have not reviewed it, I really want to hear your review on Aqua Slash. It is horrible, and I've never rooted for more people to die in my life. It's about graduates who spend the weekend at a water park, and people start dying by, they go down the slide and they run into a blade. So
That sounds like Action Park.
but yeah, so I think that I've seen a lot of horror films. So if I read something, like I read Desperation by Stephen King, and I remember that being like, wow, that was really graphic, and that, I don't know if it scared me, but it definitely like was intense. Video games, I think, are the same thing. You can control to a certain extent the character as the player, and then if you put on a VR headset, your mind gets tricked, and suddenly you are in the space. I went catatonic playing Resident Evil because this thing like crawls over your face, and like you can hear it breathing, and I literally was just like this in the VR headset. Like, I don't even know what to do. Like, I couldn't do anything, and I could have just taken it off, but I couldn't move. Like, it was
Okay, so I have a question for everybody real quick. Can you all help me figure out what's wrong with me? Because literally nothing scares me, and I would love to be scared. Everyone's like, well, I'm not afraid of this, but I am this, and vice versa. And I'm just like, nothing gets me.
why
The-
why
The
why do
the
you, why do you assume there's something wrong with you?
no, but wait. There
Maybe
is
you're
one-
the only normal person here.
No, but there's one thing that does scare me, and it's my irrational fear. I already know why it's the fear because of operant conditioning. I already know it, but I still have the fear. I'm afraid of butterflies.
That's fine because some of us are scared of Freddy
Sorry.
Krueger. Some of us are scared of Chucky.
But
Some
then,
of us
like,
are scared of
nothing
butterflies.
Horror related scares me. Haunted houses, no. Books, no. Movies, no. Like all
That's-
these things, like nothing.
It's
What did Sheldon Cooper
probably
call
because-
butterflies? Flying worms, something like that. Like,
yeah, I think so. But it's probably because
I
you have
love
more
bugs.
positive.
I
you
have
have
a
more-
pet spider. I don't.
Yeah, it's because you have more positive memories attached to the scary things than you do to butterflies.
Mm.
It's that memory function that assigns
But I want to
that
be
fear and
scared.
anxiety.
What?
As an EMDR
Oh,
therapist, and this maybe connects more to what we were talking about before with all these different reactions and how we all experience the different mediums of horror differently. I'm completely just like spitballing, but I was like, I wonder if this has something to do with embodiment, because I work a lot with clients on like staying grounded, staying embodied, and I wonder if it has to do with like how well you can stay embodied experiencing a certain medium. So like for me, I feel more like grounded and not like I'm like, because we all dissociate to a certain point, even if we don't have a dissociative disorder, like it's a normal human thing. So I wonder if you're like really good at staying grounded, Hope, like staying in your body. So then because for me, I think that I find myself like not feeling in my body when I'm watching a movie because it's such a sensory experience for me. Whereas if I'm reading a book, I'm able to stay more like embodied, whereas maybe for Felicia, maybe you are able to stay more embodied when you're watching a film because you're noticing like, that was off, that was weird, that acting didn't feel right. And then maybe in the book, you're more like leaving your body and feeling immersed. I don't know. This is where I'm going with this.
I think you're onto something here because
I like this. I like this.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like watching a movie, and Adam, I also wanted to go into video production, so that's what I went to school for, and it's what I did for a little while. And so when I'm watching a movie, I am also sort of analyzing it from that perspective. I love horror movies, but I'm also looking at the acting, the dialogue, the direction, the art direction. Like there's all of that going on. And so I think that's the other thing that helps it not feel as scary. When I'm reading a book, I don't know what it takes to write a book or how, you know what I mean? There's some story crossover, how to build and tell a story, I guess. But like when I'm reading the book, it's just in my head. And so I think you're totally onto something here in terms of how did you call it?
Like how embodied can you stay? Like how grounded can you stay while consuming this media?
Well, also like I was thinking like the things that we pay attention to, right? Because we mentioned like the acting and like the sound effects and stuff like all of those things like put together like really like scared me, but sort of like on their own I'm kind of like okay, like that's not the big of a deal. But I was thinking back too, like there's this movie that I watch, Crimson Peak. It's not like horror, but
tell them the real reason, Liz.
But I get into it. So I have the biggest crush on Tom Hiddleston, and that is the only reason why I watch this movie. And because if somebody hasn't seen it, I am so sorry, but his character dies at the end. And I was so heartbroken that his character died that I totally forgot about all the scary parts of the movie. so I'm like, but when I'm sort of like, that kind of happens though. Like if I hear sort of like a very like tragic story of something, I just get very concerned about like, the person, or like I feel so bad for them. And then I kind of forget about the scariness of sort of the event or how traumatic it was, because I'm just so concerned about this one particular thing. So I think too that depends on like how grounded you can stay, and also like what you're paying attention to when you're consuming this type of media.
Yeah,
Well,
because
go ahead,
Ed. Because in movie and video games they have that dun and the shark is coming. You know that the music is starting to speed up in a video game. Oh crap, the lights are about to turn out. I'm going to get jump scared. And you have all that amping up your anxiety, like, oh my gosh, something's about to happen. In a book, you don't have that. You don't know when the creepy music needs to start in a book.
I disagree. But in a good, I can see what you're saying. But
if you're reading Stephen King, it's all creepy music.
Yeah, you're right. You don't have that music, or but a well-written book, you will have those cues, like this is a lame thing, but it just popped in my head, like flickering lights, or there is a slow build or a dread that starts to build, and I feel my heart racing, and I'm like, when is it going to happen? So I do get that with books too, but I agree it's much more obvious in movies. Yeah.
Well, like Felicia was talking about earlier, that a well-written book can really transport her into that world, and for like the film and television video game side of it, our emotional memory can be triggered by the music or sound effects or even the visuals on screen. And like one example is Skinamarink. I don't know if anybody's seen it. The trailer is terrifying. Like to me it was, and then I saw the movie, and about 5 minutes in I turned it off because I was like, this is boring. But there was something about the deep sound of the narrator's voice, the kind of the 80s, because I was born in the 80s, that 80s carpet, and the popping of the film, the film strip, like all of that like brought me back to being a kid. And I was like, oh, and kids are always creepy in horror films.
Yes, I think there's maybe sort of like the things that scared us too, like what we attributed to being scary, because I grew up very religious. I am still somewhat religious, but specifically, older women praying in Spanish is the scariest thing you can put in a movie for some reason. That, or like a child's laughter. But I love working with kids.
That's the thing, you love kiddos.
But like just the laughter of a kid in like it's just, but because it's not the same kind of laugh, it's a different kind of laugh. I don't know, there's something about it, and it's just so scary to me. And like there's so many times where they were like I don't know what movies they were for, but they kept popping up in like my YouTube like ads and stuff. It was like this older lady's just like praying, and I was like, that's so scary, stop it. That's like what got me. And I was like, I would never see this thing. But like Lisa, you were talking about like the book that you read about all the women that survive in like
Final Girls.
Yeah, the Final Girls
sounds like
support
such
group.
an interesting story, right? Because I'm all about the story. If the storyline is good, I can be immersed and I can sort of forget about how not so great the acting was or like the sound effects or whatever. If I'm reading a book, ADHD brain, I kind of don't really remember the details. I'm all about sort of like the meat of it, right? So maybe that's also like another aspect. Somebody, I forgot who said like more like a genetic thing, and I was like, yeah, it's sort of like the things that we pay attention to, our own experiences that we had. Because when and then Adam, you said sort of like remembering like the emotional memory, like for a lot of you were all introduced to scary things, horror, when you were children, so then you remember like hanging out with parents and like doing these things with family. And for me, like my parents were not into any of that. They're also very scared of movies, so I was like, I have no good memories of like horror movies. Like Chucky's still very much scary to me, like the idea of just not being able to kill this one thing. Gosh, like just,
My parents ran a costume shop for like 30 something years. So my entire childhood was around for everything from like bunny costumes to horror. And I remember helping them like restock things, like sitting on the floor. My sister and I would be like, sitting on the floor going, okay, wait, where's the pus? Where's the pus? Where are the bullet holes? I got to find the bullet, you know, and it just kind of became like a regular, like, we're like, this is weird, right?
That's amazing though. I love that.
And see, my first experience with horror, besides horror movies, was books. Like I read all the Fear Street books when I was like 8. So I will not stick my hand in a garbage disposal because of a Fear Street book, okay? Like I don't like being in my garage with the door shut because of a Fear Street book. My parents didn't care what I read as long as I read. My sister was 16 reading Stephen King, like reading Stephen King books in the 80s, and like they didn't care what we read as long as we were reading. And I'm like, probably should have vetted my books a little bit better.
And I don't care if it's a movie, a television show, or a book. The moment a character makes a stupid decision, I'm like, well, now it's not scary anymore. You deserve it. Like, I just kind of sit back and like, all right.
Like the consequences.
Right.
Oh
Like,
my gosh,
do you
what was that
understand?
noise in the basement? Let's go down and check.
Yeah.
I do want to say they do affect me. So it's not, it does affect me. So for example, true crime, I'll go through this phase of like binging true crime. And then I realize, wow, I feel kind of depressed. Why? Oh, this is probably why. And then I have to like stop watching it. Or me and Tawny, we did like the one year at the end of the year, we were watching French Extremity. I was just all about this genre. Very, very gory and horrific, and I love it. I love that genre. But we were doing a bunch of them back to back, and her and I both were like, you know what, let's like rein it in and do something completely different. I need a break from this because it starts to affect me. I still, as a 47-year-old woman, when I'm going to bed, I jump onto my bed. I don't like having my feet near the bottom of that. Or I hate when I get up to go to the bathroom and somebody has not closed that damn closet door at the end of the hallway. It's just a big, dark gate. I get scared just to go into my closet, I put something kind of in front of the door so it doesn't slam shut, and then I'm in there with whatever the thing is. And I don't really think the thing exists, but there's just this, so it does affect me. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
But then how do
And
you?
I still notice that too. Like I'll leave my office and turn the lights on, and it's very liminal in like these long hallways, and it's just shadows and like the eeriness of the exit sign, and it's like, yeah, there's still those like, ooh, like I gotta gore.
Gotta
Like
run.
I'm not a big, I don't like gore. I like slasher films like from the 80s, but I'm not a big gore person. So when it I there's, I mean, maybe it's more, it disgusts me more than scares me, and so I have a hard time watching things that are heavy in that.
Oh, I agree. Like, I am not a Terrifier fan. I don't find that scary, and I just think it's disgusting. If there's things about, actually, since we have a lot of healthcare professionals, I think the things
As
that
I have a photo of me with Art the Clown hanging up right there.
I totally get why people like him. It wasn't for me. When the movies that scare me the most, truly scare me, I would say are psychological horrors, people losing their mind. That terrifies me, people losing their mind. So
one of my favorite
That's my
examples.
favorite. Love psychological stuff. But if
Yeah.
it's body, what I really cannot deal with is like things that are permanently altering your body and like you don't consent to it. Like amputations, I feel like I am having something amputated.
Not a
if I watch it.
Cronenberg fan then. Got it.
Can't do it.
The
But
fact,
anyway, yeah, go
the
on.
fact that there are 3 Human Centipede movies makes me question the filmmakers. Like I'm just like, how did we get 3 of those? Like I don't. But one of my favorite examples with a client was they really liked the Saw movies. This doesn't break any confidentiality because I'm not telling anything. But we used the reverse bear trap. If anybody knows what that is, it's like a bear trap at
I have
the.
a story about that, by the way, but go on.
The jigsaw puts it on the person's head. They have so much time, they got to find the key, and if they don't, then it opens and rips their head off. And so we use that as a metaphor for their anxiety. And when they left counseling, they ended up moving. I gave them a key as a kind of a going away thing that was a replica of the key from the movies, so that they always hold the key to their anxiety, so they don't have to have that reverse bear trap stuck on their head. And that was kind of my introduction to like, oh wow, I can use horror in this setting. And
That gave
so
me, yeah, that's amazing.
amazing.
I love
That's
that.
amazing.
Yeah.
Me and Tawny both are like, okay, we need you as our therapist. This is so cool.
Wait, it made me think though, because again, my experience with anxiety, I've always been anxious, and like I don't enjoy being anxious. It's probably like the reason why I don't like roller coasters, because I don't like that like initial like anxiety, or like, you know, the thing that you feel when something is coming, because I know how bad it can get. And because it's sort of like I'm always like at some level of anxious, and I'm like, it's just never gonna go away. So I'm like, I'm not trying to like increase my anxiety. That's when Hope was like, I want to be scared, and I'm like, no, why? Like I'm already like scared all the time. Like why would you want that? No, you don't.
I have a question about that, actually, because that's very curious. I do like, as we talked about, Tawny and I love that, I guess, like scary movie type anxiety, but I suffer from anxiety in my everyday life, where, you know, my lips will go numb and my heart will race. I don't get that when I'm watching movies, right? I get like this cool, I don't know how to explain it, like building dread that I enjoy. But then true crime, on the other hand, like that I have to really cut back on, because I feel anxiety. For example, if my daughter wants to go to the park with her friends and I'm not there, this is like, even thinking about it makes me feel anxious. And I hate that type of anxiety. I don't like to feel that way, but that's not what I feel when I'm being scared by a scary movie.
Well, that's also your paternal instincts kicking in that respect as well, you know, because you're not thinking of yourself at that point. You're thinking of what's going to happen to my kid. And that's a whole other level as well of, that's my baby. I'm Mama Bear. I need to, you know, because I will admit, like, I get scared if I take my dogs out and I'm like, all right, my dogs are tiny. if a hawk's nearby, they're gonna get him. Like, so then I go into like that anxious protective mode. So like it's a different kind of like
Well, and I've heard it explained as like as a therapist, we hear so much real life trauma and gore in our day-to-day lives, depending on what we do, that a horror movie is a step below what we hear.
mhm.
And then there are some types of horror movies like Freddy and Jason that aren't real. And then you have stuff like The Strangers that is based off of the Manson murders that can be real. So somebody breaking into our house and our house being haunted, or someone living in our house, is stuff that has happened in real life to people. And so that is scarier than a guy who haunts our dreams and can kill us. Now, granted, Wes Craven based Nightmare on Elm Street off of a real thing that happened in Japan, in a sleep killing, like a disease that was killing youths in their sleep, but he added the scary guy, you know.
Well, that what you just said, Lisa, makes me think of there's like this joke that went around was like, oh well, they stopped making Black Mirror for a while because real life was worse than what they would do, you know, and that was like the joke of why they like stopped making the Black Mirror show for a while. It's like, oh well, life sucks now. We don't that show's nothing, you know. So it's kind of the same.
Well, my husband and I have a running joke that if we watch Criminal Minds or True Crime something, if I notice the episode takes place in like, let's just say Seattle, I'll go, well, great, now we can't ever go to Seattle, you know, or great, we can't ever go camping, you know, because they always fall into that like, well, we're never going camping now, not after we watch this true crime thing. So
Now I listen to so much true crime.
Same.
And that was also why I was having
Yeah.
imposter syndrome, because I was like, I'm more on the true crime side of things. And I don't know why, but I do think there's a sensory element to true crime where a lot of the creators have very relaxing voices, whereas horror has like this sensory element that really gets me. And maybe it's also like I'm a musician, like I'm very sensitive to sounds. So I think it's the sound of some of my favorite true crime people's voices that relax me. But
Yeah, there's a girl I listen to, Annie Elise.
oh my gosh, I love Annie.
Yeah. Thank you. By the way, thank you, Felicia. Felicia recommended her to me.
Patron here. I love her.
Yeah. So like she has like this nice, cute, relaxing little voice, and it's like, why is she talking about this? She's like so sweet. Like so.
I like when she is like really mean about the criminals, which is like
she's
terrible.
like,
I'm a therapist.
stupid. How dare they?
Everyone. But I don't know.
No, I agree. I mean, the one podcast that I mentioned that I was watching before we did this, I found them because that YouTuber had like I'm a history fan. I love hearing, again, it's a story thing. Like I just love stories. And so he had a lot of like biographies of like, you know, ancient people or old people or whatever from back in the day. And then like the way that he tells things, it's very like his voice is very soothing to me, and he doesn't take it that seriously because he's just kind of like reading it for the first time and he goes off on tangents, so it kind of like breaks the whole like immersion for me, so then I don't get as scared of, you know, the things. I think, and also for me it's because I also have this sort of like very rosy view of the world where I'm like everything is sunshine and happiness and everybody is like me. Thinking that I don't ever have this whole like, oh, I should be aware of like, you know, when I'm traveling by myself in that darker space, and then like when I hear these like true crime things and I'm like, okay, maybe I should be like aware and conscious about like these things are dangerous or potentially dangerous. So that's kind of like why I enjoy watching, because to me it's sort of like a reality check of like not living in this like fantasy world where everything is, you know, sunshine and rainbows.
Well, Liz, you mentioned earlier that, you know, growing up in Mexico, you would walk down a street and there'd be like an alleyway and you just kind of quickly walk by it. Like when you said that, I'm just picturing the audience of the movie going, you know, usually they yell at the screen and say like, don't go down there. And they're like, yeah, see, you'd survive the horror film because
you are the final girl. You are the final girl.
was like, what? I have ADHD, so I don't really notice the details. And two, I was just too scared to do anything. I was like, I'm not going to check anything. I'm not going to go outside when it's dark. So I think, yeah, I survived everything.
I'm just picturing Ghostface following you around, like, where's she going? I don't I can't figure
Like,
out.
I could see him just
I
like
was-
fucking his knife, be like, I give up.
I was just thinking somebody needs to make this a movie, an ADHD, like person, like final girl who doesn't even know that she is the final girl, and she's just not going
hunted and
down the
stalked.
alley.
Isn't
She
it kind
hears-
of like scary movie as it is in
Yeah.
that sense? Like,
Yeah.
Goes to take out the trash, but leaves it because they need to go clean out the closet, but then they
Yeah,
don't make
know,
it to the
hears a noise and just goes, it was the cat. And then Ghostface is in there, like, hand next to the vase that just fell over, going, why isn't she coming?
This
Or
is
the-
not that
the-
exact.
I was just gonna say, like, I know the biggest thing back in, like, thinking of like the Scream movies and everything, people just answering the phone. I never answer the phone, so like they would have a hard time getting me because I'm like, no, bye.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that in the, I think it was, I don't remember if it was number 4 or 5. I think it was 5. They kind of play on that where the phone rings and I think she texts like, "Is this you? Like, who are you?" Like, we went from a culture of, I mean, growing up in the 80s, and caller ID and answering the phone and having to learn how to like ask for somebody. And now I even find myself like, I don't answer the phone. I don't want to talk on the phone.
Exactly.
But seeing that evolution from the first movie with the corded phone all the way up to the cell phones where they're not even answering it, like they're texting the person going, who this, right? Like I don't.
Or Googling it.
Yeah.
I'm like I'm Googling that number.
Oh, yeah. Where's that area code from? I don't know.
Or like
anyone
how
out there.
there's like Ring cameras now. It's like, I'm not going to the door. No,
Right.
goodbye.
Beautiful thing about my Ring camera is it's right next to where I sit on the couch, so all I do is go, no.
I'm like, the introvert me is like, I don't talk in the phone. I don't answer doors. Like, no, I don't talk to people. What is this?
Yeah.
Like, I get irritated when I set my Uber Eats to leave at the door and they knock and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
When they deliver packages, they do that too. And I'm like, no. Well, I just get annoyed because my dog starts barking.
I was gonna say, I don't know anybody else with pets, but I have built-in alarm system. Anybody within 30 feet of my house, my dogs are going. So
yeah, but
that's
they also like react to like cats walking by. So now I'm like, what if at one point my house is being like, like I have a stalker or someone trying to break into my house and I'm just like, shut up, Canelo.
So
Like it's just a cat.
fun fact. People are less likely to break into a house with a dog because of it being alerted and the dog's barking and all of that, because they want the least amount. So they'll look for like older, rich, no pets is like primo.
I can't
I'm
remember
always
where
gonna
I
have a
heard
dog
this.
now.
Yeah, but no, I'm sorry. I was watching something and it was like somebody I think it was a true crime thing. And a guy had entered a woman's home and felt so bad about what he was going to do to her. So he didn't end up doing it, but he told her, get a dog because it will protect you against the next person who wants to do this. It was one of those Netflix ones.
Remember, I cannot think of what it is, but I know
Night
exactly what you're
Stalker?
talking about.
No.
Or was it
It's
the Green River Killer with the
No.
No.
It was the really weird one. It was I'll have to dig
Yeah,
up the
it was
name.
one who went
so
around to
familiar.
apartments and he was looking for like back doors that were open.
Yeah.
And
This
yeah.
is gonna bug me because I know
I don't-
exactly what you're talking about, but I don't know what it is.
I don't know if it's more entertaining or disturbing that you all just listed off a whole bunch of titles and everyone said no.
Yeah.
Like-
Nope, not that one. Yeah. It's 100.
You're
No,
like
it wasn't
similar, but
Bundy,
not.
It wasn't Dahmer. It wasn't
Yeah.
Gacy.
I think but just something back on the sort of prepping yourself for what's going. I think that's a lot of true crime, and I don't consume as much true crime as I used to, but something about it always made me feel prepared. And I think, my partner Jade and I had a conversation about this a few weeks ago. I've always loved survival horror. And specifically, my anxiety is mostly related to safety and health of me and the people around me. And so I feel like survival horror really sort of like hits that fear. And he said something interesting. He was like, survival horror, things like, zombie movies, it almost feels like we're in a dialogue with ourselves about like by creating the movie, we're in a dialogue with ourselves about what we would do as people to survive and what we would need to or can or cannot do. And so I think there's also something to that preparation that seems to be linked to the anxiety. And I'm not sure if that's good, but that's definitely part of it for me.
Well, yeah,
Well, I think
because
that's a part of it too.
Yellow
Is we?
Oh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, do you watch Yellow Jackets, Tawny? That's
I haven't seen it just because I don't have Showtime or whatever, but I keep hearing about it, and so I do want to watch it really bad.
Yeah, I was thinking of that survival aspect because that's something that is scary that I really enjoy. And I think it is that aspect of like, what would I do? Like, how would this play out? Yeah.
I think
Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Something interesting about survival horror, especially like zombie cinema. And I did a lot of research in college about zombie cinema specifically, is that it's a product of the time, and so it's usually a commentary of what's happening at the time. And it always makes me think like
The
COVID,
Romero stuff.
right? Like we spent the last 4 years when we were in lockdown trying to prep, but there's people who didn't believe it, there's people who believed it, there's people arguing, and we just watched World War Z, and I'm like, it's kind of like COVID. Like, what do we do? Like, because we're also reliant not on just on ourselves and how do we prep, but also our neighbors and our friends, and
Yes.
which can then impact our safety.
Totally. And I think one of the scariest things, and Felicia and I talk about this a lot when we encounter it watching movies, one of my favorite scary things to see in movies is like the chaos and panic of a group. Because I think, you're really faced with a situation where people are truly panicked. They're not going to do always what's best in the situation just because people are scared and they act in different ways. And so that's something that when I see that when I feel like that's done well in a movie, I feel like it's so effective because you cannot control a group of people like that.
There's a scene in The Strangers. I always think about this. The Strangers has some of I think the creepiest moments because they're subtle and they don't like. There's like two camps. There's the kind of more realistic. There's long shots. The like, wow, they're really building up that suspense. And there's those jump scares, which are over. And I think that's the Hitchcock roller coaster thing, is the jump scare. But there's a scene in The Strangers where, if I'm remembering correctly, two of the characters end up in a room and they put their back to a corner to where they can only see the door. And it's like, yes, they're finally doing something smart. And then their friend gets attacked and dragged away. And so they run after him. And it's like, oh, well, now you deserve it. Like I can't root for you because you were there, you were done.
Yeah, I love this because I completely agree with all of you. I don't know if I really thought of it that way, Tawny, but you're absolutely right. And The Strangers is one of my favorite top horror movies. And I'm a bunker down girl. I'm going to make sure that my back is covered and there's only one way in, and I'm ready. If I'm able to do that, that's what I do. But then, yeah, I feel like I'm learning like how I would be able to adjust. True crime, most definitely. I started watching true crime when I was very young. I experienced trauma, and so I started consuming true crime, and it was more like I was learning what predators look for so that I could not do those things. And then it made me feel like I had a little bit more control, when very falsely, of course, but I felt like I had a little bit more control because I was learning these things. And now I'm most definitely the mom. You've probably seen jokes on social media, but I'll call my daughter and go, hey honey, so yeah, if you see a little piece of paper on your windshield, don't touch it. People are drugging those things, then you'll pass out. Like, I am the one that no matter what the kids or I or anybody's going to do, I have a true crime example of why you should be careful. And that's really not healthy, but I think it's a false sense of that I have control.
Yeah, but it's true though. Like I remember, growing up, I was in Maryland. I lived between DC and Baltimore, so like two of like the top 5 crime-ridden places on in the U.S. And I remember, like for my 6th birthday, I got a pocket knife as a gift. They're like, "All right, when you go to the mailbox, here you go," and it's like, "Thank you." Like,
Well, and going back to like control and group people, like talking like we've mentioned The Village earlier, and spoiler warnings for anyone who hasn't seen The Village. That one group of people used fear to keep an entire village in control in an area without asking questions. They use these monsters as a thing, but then because one person had a disability, or 2 people actually had a disability, the story could go on for generations and this village could stay safe without anyone knowing what was on the outside. And so it's very interesting how control and you can use fear to control other people, but sometimes our fear controls us.
well, that goes
Well,
back
as
to that
audience
religious
members,
folk horror that Felicia brought up before.
Yeah.
yeah, and as audiences too, I think control, we talked about trauma earlier, about kind of dissociating from it, but sometimes we also lean into it to try to take back that control and learn, Felicia, like you were saying, how would I handle this? Like, what do I need to learn about this? And if you think about the final girl, the reason the final girl survives is because they go from maybe the anxiety, innocent, scared person who is out of control, and they find a way to gain control. And so as audiences, we do the same sometimes, and lean into the things that scare us so that we can take back the control of maybe the trauma we experienced as a kid.
Absolutely. And I think that's why movies about religion, like I was mentioning earlier, people are the most terrifying, more terrifying than any monster that they can ever put in front of me, or any ghost. People are so terrifying. And I think, just like Lisa was saying, just like everybody was saying, when you get into that group mentality, and I think religion, not necessarily religion in general, but like different experiences, especially inside movies, that's where people, they get real scary.
So I keep saying that one of the reasons why I want to get into watching or reading like horror is because of the stories. I know the stories are good, and I want to be able to enjoy the stories. And to me, I as everybody was talking about, like the different types of anxiety that they're talking about, like, so for me, the scariest thing is like not knowing, right? So not being able to be prepared. So I do like watching or consuming things that have an ending, right? Or like where there is someone who knows enough to be able to like survive at the end, so then I can be like, okay, I can just copy whatever they're doing. And also it has an ending, right? Like the person got caught. I think it's very much like Scooby-Doo. It's so scary. Oh no, what's happening? Mystery. And then everyone's safe again, right? Like that's what I like, because the reason why I like or like when I listen to true crime, most of the, I don't know if this just so happens, but most of the cases that are presented in the one podcast that I listen to have an ending, like the person got caught. And then so I'm like, it's in my head, I'm like, okay, well then the mystery got solved, and like it all kind of got wrapped up in like a nice little gift, right? The ones that I am constantly sort of thinking about are the ones where like we don't know what happened, and then I'm like, what do you mean we don't know what happened? Like if somebody needs to know what happened, like we need to fix this right now. Like somebody needs to like sort of like finish the story. Like it can just be like, we don't know kind of thing.
Well, that makes me think of like if we look at horror films or characters, even in books, they're scary because we don't know what they're capable of and what they are. But the moment they're unmasked, then they're not as scary. We see like the real, kind of like in Scooby-Doo, right? You see the real, it was the gardener. If it weren't for you kids.
And that meddling dog.
Right. And the same is true for kind of our mental health too, right? If you live with anxiety, the moment you kind of unmask it and face it and put those coping mechanisms in place, it's not as terrifying. And so sometimes maybe going into horror films, Liz, for you, as a like, oh, this is a metaphor for horror or for anxiety. Once it's unmasked, it's not as scary. Like think about Signs, the alien. Once we all saw the alien from Signs, like oh, well, it's not scary.
Yeah, and that's what I do with some of my teenagers who have anxiety problems. There's an artist in the UK called Toby Allen, and he makes real life monsters. And he has actually made art representations of mental health disorders based
This is
on
like
what
the
he
sketchy
sees.
sort of
Yeah,
ones. That,
not the creepy gothic ones, but they're like fuzzy monsters that kind of look cute. So I show my kids those, and then I have them do the art exercise of make your own monster. Some
Mhm.
clients have represented it as a tornado that just goes around their mind, and if their anxiety is fine, they can see the monster. If their anxiety is super high, all they see is the tornado. Or hey, this little monster carries around this calendar and constantly goes, hey, where are you supposed to be? And I tell them the bigger the monster is, the higher your anxiety is. And then if you're able to turn to this monster and go, hey, why are you so big today? Like yesterday you were tiny, today you're 7 feet tall. What's going on? If you have that conversation with your monster, they are better able to go, this is why I'm anxious. I have this giant test coming up, or I have SATs coming up, or I'm scared I won't be invited to the prom. So by them, putting a face to their anxiety, they're actually able to be like, oh, this is what's going on.
Yeah, I actually have
was
mine
that-
name. I have
was that
mine
a
name
person?
it, and so
Sorry.
so that way they can tell them to like and name it something mundane too. Like your depression's name is Bob. Tell Bob to go away. Like it's not that it's a cure all, but it's meant to like break the
Mhm.
the thought, and depersonalize it from themselves. Like you are not depressed. Depression is causing you to do this, or anxiety is causing you to do this. So it is this little gremlin on your shoulder.
Yeah.
What about Liz?
What?
He
What?
said gremlin, so I said, what
Oh,
about Liz?
yeah, I know. I was like, well, they're kind of cute, right? No, because I made a logo for Dr. Gremlin, and it's this cute pink monster thing. So now I think of gremlins as cute fuzzy animals. But Lisa, what's the name of that person, the artist that you were?
Toby
just saying?
Allen.
Okay. I want to check them out. Okay. So we have been talking for quite a bit, and I would love to continue the conversation, but I do not want to intrude more in your time because I know you're all like probably very busy people and agree to be here today. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this and sharing all your stories. I think I'm a bit more prepared, less scared to be able to do this with hope. So thank you for that.
There should be an episode each with like, okay, Lisa will do an episode with us of watching a movie. Adam
heck yeah.
will, the Tawny and Felicia, Easin, like we should all do that just to watch Liz's
To
reaction.
watch me react. Okay.
I will totally plug in my laptop sitting on the couch. We will watch the movie at the same time, press play at the same time.
Yes.
Totally down for that.
Sounds
So
great.
I know all of you have some really cool things that you guys are doing online that I would love people to definitely check out. So we just kind of go down the same line that we did earlier. But if you could tell people where they can find you, if you're open to collaborations, or if you are providing some sort of service, let the people know so they can also get to know you and reach out to you. Hope, you want to get started?
Yeah, again, I am Hope with the Mind Brain Movies podcast. You can find me on YouTube. I also work with Liz for the nonprofit Psychology for Geeks. We're kind of hand-in-hand partners, more or mom and annoying daughter. I don't know. But you
She-
can
This image of you like holding those like those leash backpacks.
Oh yes.
Yes.
yeah, so but yeah, really good stuff. We have a lot of episodes, a lot of projects coming up. It's gonna be really great. I'm super excited. Like I said, we're partnered up a lot, so if you find me, you find her, and vice versa. So
Merch. Buy the Dr. Gremlin merch. I have this campaign that there's three of us.
you have this campaign.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said. It's me. I have this campaign to get more people to buy the Dr. Girl merch, only because I want to say that I am selling more merch than the other two girls. Doesn't really matter, but I want to win. So yeah, buy the merch. Anyway, wait, you say that we have a YouTube channel and they can follow you on social?
Yeah, so Mind Brain Movies on
I
YouTube.
don't. I was clearly paying attention. Anyway, so all of this information, just in case you're also ADHD like me and forget what
Linked
people are saying,
in the description below.
everything is going to be in the description. Okay. Easin, you want to go next?
Sure. So you can find me at The Spooky Therapist on Instagram. I offer therapy anywhere in Pennsylvania, mostly for religious trauma and complex childhood trauma. And that's about it. I always have trouble like separating out my personal stuff. But it's like as a therapist, it's like I have other spooky things. You're welcome to like reach out to me on my more like artistic accounts, but then I always have a no clients on my like artistic account rule. Yeah, we'll say The Spooky Therapist on Instagram.
Lisa?
So I'm Lisa, and my socials are at Pop Culture Counseling, and I tend to, on my socials, I tend to focus on different things. So this month we're going over what Pixar characters are doing to cope with their trauma. Next month we're going into Harry Potter.
Ooh.
You
Ravenclaw's
should
the
do.
best.
You should do. Wait. You should do. Oh, yes, I agree with you. You should do a horror one for like October.
Oh, I did that last year for October. I did what if like Freddie got therapy, like what it would look like for him to get therapy, and what like Jason and stuff. And so I did one like a week. So this October it'll be all horror.
It'll be awesome.
I always thought it would be fun to see Jason at work on the other days, or I'm sorry, Michael Myers. You know, he works on
Yeah.
Halloween, so what does he do the rest of the time? He's just at an office job, changing the copier, and you know,
Really boring life.
Yeah.
Felicia?
I'm Felicia, and Tawny and I are Two Chicks and a Horror Flick. So you could find us on your Instagram's our main hub, Two Chicks and a Horror Flick, or you can find us on your favorite social media platform. We also have a YouTube channel if you prefer that. And if you would like to listen to the show, we would love it. And you can find that on your favorite podcatcher. So anywhere you listen to your podcasts, we will be there. And Liz, it might be a good spot for you because you can listen to the stories without experiencing.
I was just thinking that. I was like, if you guys go over sort of like the whole plot and the story, that would be way less scary, and it would feed my, my need for really interesting stories. So yeah, I think I'll check you guys out. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but you
Everyone check us out.
Great. I also personally listen to them all the time. Like I will definitely actually message them like, all right, you're putting a new episode out. Getting withdrawals. Come on.
Thank you.
And I love binging, so you have enough for me to binge.
Oh yeah, they have plenty
Yeah.
of content.
We have, I think we just released our 158th episode.
Oh,
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. On Alien. And so that was the only thing that I'll add to Felicia's plug is because Alien Romulus is coming out, that will be our next episode that we record in a couple weeks. But our latest one was on the original Alien from 1979.
Adam?
I'm Adam. You can find me on social media at a Storyologist, like psychologist, but Storyologist. My website is storyology.care, and so you can find more about me there. I have a similar rule about no clients on my personal stuff. So my Instagram is a Storyologist, and then my website, all my other information's on my website.
Okay, well, once again, thank you everyone for because everyone's like from a different like time zone. I don't think about these things, you guys. I'm just like, oh, this will be cool. Like these people I want to geek out with. So like you should come. And I don't really think about how difficult it is to like, actually find a time for everyone to meet. So thank you so much for being here today. And again, sharing all your stories and expertise. And for giving me or taking me one step closer to not being afraid of horror. And for everyone listening, this is going to be a very long episode. I think it's almost going to be like 2 hours. So thank you for making it all the way to the end. And if you have any other tips on how I can sort of overcome my fear of scary movies, you can write it in the comments if you have any questions or ideas, because I would love collaborating. So I would love to collaborate with everyone here once again. So if you have any cool ideas, you can also write that in the comments, and maybe we can address those questions. Maybe like the next panel, next collaboration. You can check out I don't know, I don't plan these things ahead of time, so you all need to follow me and subscribe to the Psychology for Geeks channel to figure out what's happening, because I kind of forget, and I just my head is all over the place. So yeah, check us out at Psych the number 4 Geeks on pretty much every social media out there, and yeah, subscribe, like, comment, share with other people. We also have a Patreon for Psychology for Geeks, if you want to join that as well and see your name sort of like as the credits of each of our panels, interviews, and other fun episodes that we do.
It all helps
And
the nonprofit.
yes, it will all be going to the nonprofit, and we have a lot of cool things that we're trying to do for my local community here, and also for the online community. Oh, we just got a Discord, so also join the Discord if you're interested in that, because that's another place we can geek out. And thank you so much for everyone here for joining once again, and for everyone that is watching at home for making it all the way to the end. And don't forget to reframe and re-enchant your life, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.